Hey, the holidays are almost here, which means you might get asked to sit down at the piano and play while the rest of your family and friends sing along with you. Holiday sing-alongs can be one of the most magical times of the year, and they're an opportunity if you play or you practice piano mostly by yourself the rest of the year. They're an opportunity to share and experience making music with other people, which is great. But sometimes the best intentions for a sing-along don't give us and the people around us everything that we need to make it really successful and to make it really fun. So today, I'm going to show you exactly how to lead a Christmas sing-along with your family so that it feels natural and it sounds good, and most importantly, so that everyone enjoys it, including you. Let's start with just understanding exactly what we, as the pianist, are really needed for in a sing-along. We need to first keep a clear and steady beat or pulse. And sometimes we need to be able to keep that steady pulse in the face of people who might be pushing the tempo or pulling back on the tempo while they sing. Our job is to be rock solid. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't show a little bit of rubato. It doesn't mean we can't show a phrase or anything like that, but we need to be ultra clear in what the tempo is and where we lead people. So first of all, get used to being able to keep a metronome precise pulse and test your ability to keep that pulse when other sounds or music might be happening. So perfect way to do this. Literally pull up any piece of music on your phone, on a playback device. It could be, whatever you've got right next to the piano, be holiday or not. It could be any piece of music. Hit play. And while that music plays, practice playing your sing-along tunes, keeping your sense of pulse, right? Keeping that beat totally consistent no matter what is coming at your ears. Second, and related to keeping a beat, choose a tempo that everyone can actually sing the words at, okay? It might be fun on your own, to see how fast you could play Deck the Halls, but if you do this, well, that's nice, but people aren't going to be able to keep up with you, and everyone is just going to plain stop singing. So sing the words to yourself and choose a tempo that's still right for the song, but on the slower side and on the more comfortable side. So for Deck the Halls, that might be something like this instead. Third in this section on knowing our role as the pianist, support the melody. So if you happen to also be able to sing while you play, be the leader with your voice too. Sing loud and proud and tell people, hey, here's the melody. Come on and join me. And if you don't sing, play the melody out nice and strongly with your right hand. So in a sing-along, our role isn't like being a collaborative pianist where we're trying to balance the singer or the choir, or we're trying to make room for them and keep room for them. Now, our job is really to make sure that people know where the melody is and to make sure that they can still hear it from us, even while they're singing. Now, the opposite of this point is also true. So support the melody, but in doing so, don't overcomplicate things. Don't play big, sweeping arpeggios, That sounds cool, especially on your own. But don't play them if they're so fast and they have so many notes that you can't keep projecting the melody. Yeah. And if you like to play jazzy arrangements around Christmas time, great. But try not to choose to follow an arrangement that has lots of, we'll just say, strange chords for today. Chord substitutions, chords that are really far away from a diatonic or in the key. Your ear might be used to listening to chords like that and that complex harmony. But for people who don't play music all the time, keep the harmony simple so they can understand where they fit. All right, now that we know our job, let's talk about choosing keys. Remember that your family and your friends probably aren't professional singers. So most untrained female voices live about in this range, from the A below middle C to about the C, maybe the A above, the octave above, sometimes the C. It's an approximate range. Everybody's a little different, but that's approximately where the voice lives. And most untrained male singers are about down here, an octave down. Same range, about an octave down. Let's take Silent Night as an example here. So most often, Silent Night is printed in the key of B flat. Right? Holy night. could keep going. At the end of that piece, we have sleep in heavenly peace. Let's take a look at where those notes are in the key that Silent Night is usually printed in. Sleep starts on a C, which is going to be at the top of people's range, and then it goes further up in heavenly. Even though it's only briefly on that E flat, that's really substantially higher than that C is. So if the C is the top of our range, E flat's going to be usually unattainable for people. And then at the very end of this phrase, we have to hold a D that's also above. So this entire phrase sits really, really high. It's really uncomfortable to sing. And if you end up choosing to play Silent Night in B flat, what might happen is that it'll sound, when you get to this beautiful moment, it'll sound kind of like an elephant just came storming into the room, because there'll just be this cacophony of sound, because people will start screaming or they'll be really out of pitch. They won't know how to hit those notes. And what was such a pleasant sound all of a sudden turns into something that's not the greatest. Maybe it'd be good for a good laugh. But, okay, let's think about this. What if we want to play Silent Night and we want to play it in a key that's more accessible for the singers? Take that highest note. It was E flat in our original key. Right? How far down do we need to bring that in order to fit it into the typical range we established from A to C, right? We need to bring it down a minor third. So now we don't want to sing that line. We want to sing. And then there we go. Heavenly peace. That actually puts us, and if we think about the key relationship, we were in the key of B flat. Bring the key down a minor third to G major. Okay, now at the end of the piece, we're on the D chord for this same segment. Sleep in. There's our C, highest note. Heavenly peace. And then with the note we need to sustain and hold is a B instead. Now let's get to the end of Silent Night. Sleep in the lowest note ends up being a G, okay? That one's also slightly out of the range we established, but it's much better if we choose one note, a note that's just a little bit too low, especially because it's the end of the phrase and the end of the piece, right? That needs to be soft and quiet, and it's fine. It's much better to choose one that's too low than to have a whole bunch of notes, especially during that big, wonderful moment in the song, that are out of reach for most everybody that's going to be singing. Now, guess what? You don't need to worry about being able to transpose on the spot. It is great practice if you do it and if you can do it. But with a site like Music Notes, and by the way, this video is not sponsored by them, but on Music Notes, you can choose a whole variety of keys when you're downloading most pieces of music on there, right? So if you want to be ready ahead of time, look for keys that keep the voice between these notes, about A and C, the octave higher. So the key of G is great for Silent Night. The key of A is also pretty good for Silent Night, yeah? The key of G is great for Jingle Bells, and it's great for Deck the Halls, and Away in a Manger, and We Wish You a Merry Christmas. So you see a theme here. G, maybe even F sometimes, depending on the song. And maybe for a piece like Joy to the World, where everything sits in a slightly different part of the scale, C major is going to be better. Because if we're in C, the piece starts on the high note, and it goes down the scale, and it lives for a long time at the top, right? So be sure in a piece like Joy to the World that we have a key that's low enough that we can actually sing and comfortably all those high notes that we continue to go back to. And lastly, a piece like Angels We Have Heard on High, that is printed usually in the key of F. And the F is also a great key. But again, it goes up to C, and in the refrain, it just touches that D above. So you might even consider stepping that down to E major to, again, make that high note just a little more accessible for people. Let's talk about bringing people in for the first verse. No one wants to start singing alone or feel like they need to guess when to come in. So first off, pick out and play a very clear intro. Often you can use just the last 2 or 4 measures of the song that you're about to sing. Works perfectly. It gives people the key. It gets their ear to recognize the song. It's long enough to establish our sense of pulse, but it's not so long that it starts to confuse everyone. So if you can, 2 or 4 measures and play that melody line. If we go back to A Silent Night, we don't have to play Sleep in Heavenly Peace. We don't have to play that line. We could start with the bars after that. Sleep, same words, but the melody is the lower one, right? And watch what I did there. I'm keeping our quarter note pulse. So here we go. Sleep. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3. 2, 3. Yeah? This is a perfect opportunity to bring up hymnals. Now, obviously, the song Santa Claus is Coming to Town, that is not going to be in a hymnal. So if you want those more popular pieces, go to music notes for something like that. But often in hymnals, and especially the piano parts that go with hymnals, they include a couple important things. First, they're probably going to be in a good key for singing, so you're not going to need to worry about transposing. Secondly, the melody is probably included in the piano line in that sheet music from the hymnal, right? So you're not going to need to read maybe 3 staves like you would in a typical piece of pop music where the vocal is separate from the other 2. Third, the accompaniments are usually really straightforward in a hymnal, which is great for this, right? They just keep the pulse, they keep our harmony going. And last but not least, they often include a recommended introduction. So in this particular version that I'm showing you on screen, there is a bracket. The bracket gives us our introduction right there. So when you see those brackets in a hymnal, in this particular case, and sometimes they're marked in a few other ways, but if you see those brackets or the other introductory markings, or look for them and say, I'm going to play from the first bracket to the last bracket or to the ending bracket. You don't have to play that intro, but it takes the thought out of it. It makes it really simple. You can glance, say, oh, that's the recommended bracket. Silent Night in this case is in A, and it's going through the last 4 bars. Yeah. And we keep going. And you could, of course, if you wanted to, just take a shorter bracket, mark your own introduction. So what if you don't have a hymnal? Or what if you're playing something that's a more popular piece and you check out those 2 to 4 measures at the end? Maybe they don't work, right? Well, instead, try playing a simple 1, 4, 5 progression. So let's go back and think about working Silent Night in the key of G. In the key of G, our 1 chord is G major. Our 4 chord is C major. Our 5 chord is D or D7. So let's keep the pulse, know what meter we're in. We're in 6/8. You could almost feel it in 3/4 as well. Okay, so let's count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and play the 1 chord. That was 1, 4, 5. Let's do that again. So 1, and I'm showing the pulse, right? 1, 2, 3, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. Great, that works out to be a perfect introduction. Last little bit, can you give people your starting note? Sa. So it would be there, the 5th scale degree. Let's go through the introduction one more time. Here's the 1 chord. So I snuck in the first note of the melody right before we were going to start singing. And that just helps give people that center to say, okay, that's the right note. That's the one I was looking for. I don't need to guess about where I'm going. So we're leading them in with tempo. We're giving them the key. We're giving them their first pitch. There was something else I did too. Did you notice? When we got to the end of that, the 4 chord, 5, 2, 3. I also gave the breath. My whole body did. My head did. My body language did. Even my hands did. Right when I played that note. Sigh. So you can do that too. Give people their first breath with a head nod, a little movement back, or a lift of the body. Silent night. And people are going to be watching you, and they'll see that little thing. And even if they have never sung in choir before or followed somebody, they'll know what that means. Let's wrap this up with a handful of general tips. So first up, we mentioned the hymnal earlier, right? Another thing that some hymnals have, and lots of pop sheet music has, are the chord changes above each line of music. If we go back to the Silent Night I was showing you, you can see the chord changes for this key are written in here. We have A and E, and they're all above the correct measures, right? So try to look for music that has that, because sometimes we might want to switch from playing the notes that are written on the page for us and instead read it almost like a lead sheet. So play something related to the chord change. This also relates to our second general tip. Always keep time for everyone and show that pulse regularly. So what happens if the piano part, has a hold for a half note or a dotted half note, like the end of the verse of Silent Night? When we're going to sing another verse, don't just sit there, because as soon as we have that pause, people aren't going to know when to come back in to sing verse 2. Instead, we get to the end, and we know we're going to play A major because we're following the sheets here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so in this case, it's written in 6/8. I gave a note, and I arpeggiated a note on every eighth note, right? So I keep everybody feeling that pulse instead of giving them this long sustained chord that happens to be what's written, but that is going to really confuse people about where to come back in for the next verse. If your chord reading skills are pretty good, you could expand on this, right? We could do more reading of the chord changes, and you could play more arpeggiation, right? And you can build a really lush harmony for people to sing on top of. And we're also keeping time at the same time. So there's a difference between a supportive arpeggio, right, and just way too much fluff. Fluff was like what we did earlier today, where it was like, okay, that's just way too many notes. But a supportive arpeggio in A might be, and if I combine that with reading the chord changes that are on this particular sheet, I'm going to play the melody, and I'm not going to be reading any of the rest of the notes. I'm not going to really be reading the bass clef. I'm going to be arpeggiating around and following the chord changes and the top line of the melody. So So then we're playing these really thick harmonies that are just, they feel really good to sing along with, right? And it's so much deeper than just playing what's printed on the page. So we're taking that page and then we're expanding upon it. All right, third up, try to be responsive to what you're hearing. So if some people are struggling to find the melody and you can tell they're getting a little lost or they're trailing off into the distance, play the melody out more. And if the group is strong and confident and they're really having a great time, then add to their confidence by playing bigger textures and bigger harmonies. Yeah? Did you think you chose a good tempo, but people are struggling to breathe between phrases, maybe? Well, then subtly slow the tempo down over the course of 4 bars or 8 bars, almost so slowly that people don't quite notice, but it just gets easier. Or are other people in the room rushing? Maybe bring out the pulse more, probably with quarter notes or whatever your most basic subdivision of the pulse is. All right, fourth, people want to feel supported by the music and not like they're sitting out on top of it all alone, right? So favor dynamics that are bigger and stronger than you might otherwise use when you're playing by yourself. If you have 20 people around the piano singing Silent Night, don't play it pianissimo. Don't play it the way you might play it for yourself as a nice lullaby. because no one will hear the piano if you play it that softly. So lean into mezzo forte, or even a little bigger at times at the end of the piece. Yeah, even a little bigger, just to keep people from feeling like they're alone. And lastly, let's talk a little bit about energy levels. Don't let a huge amount of time go by between, finishing a piece and moving on to the next one. So we don't want people walking over to the other room or to the kitchen to grab their third eggnog because there was just too long of a lull between songs. So have a plan for the songs that you're going to play and sing, know the order that they're going to be in, and then jump into the next song, like 5 seconds or 10 seconds after finishing your last one. And speaking of stringing songs together, try to mix upbeat and slower songs. So when you finish Silent Night, don't go into Away in a Manger, which is another slow carol, right? Instead, play Joy to the World. And if the energy is higher, if you've had a high tempo carol, maybe you could throw another quick one in right away. Read the Room, right? So you could go on to We Wish You a Merry Christmas or Deck the Halls, right? But then follow that second quick one up with another slower piece. And when we get to the end of our set, have a plan for a piece that everybody knows and everybody loves singing, probably one that's upbeat to finish with, that we can be nice and strong and confident, and people get to leave the sing-along and go back maybe to the rest of the party or leave for the night with just a great feeling and smiling and having had a wonderful time experiencing music with everybody and singing some of their favorite songs. If you've gotten this far in the video, thank you. And also, all of the things that we talked about today that are a part of leading a great sing-along, they are also fantastic skills to develop for your music for the whole year. Even if you only play classical repertoire, even if you only play solo repertoire and you're not doing collaborative work. I'm Charles Stepanek. This is Pianist Academy. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you next time.